The backyard pool party had been a fun Father's Day celebration for the small group of families. Then, as they were saying their goodbyes, Katie Trotman noticed her 2-year-old daughter, Nora, was missing.
I looked around, and I heard a voice say to me, "Where's Nora?" And I looked around, I hadn't seen her, and that's kind of when I noticed that something must be wrong.
Panic flooded Katie's mind as she turned to her husband, Ron.
I checked her outside, I called her name, she didn't answer. And that's when Katie said, "Check the pool."
And then I heard my husband kind of make a scream.
I saw her floating next to the edge. She wasn't breathing, she had no life to her. Her eyes were rolled back in her head. It was unbearable to see.
I remember her face, and she wasn't there anymore. That's when I dropped to my knees. I said, "Nora, come back to your body right now in the name of Jesus." And then I just said, "Jesus, help."
I'm crying out to, I'm like, "Please bring her back, please bring her back."
Katie called 911 while 2 nurses at the party started CPR. One of them was Alicia Mosley.
I knew she was gone, but I knew that if we could get blood moving, that she might have a chance. Everybody was crying, the kids were crying. Olivia said, "Is my sister going to die?"
Moments later, paramedics arrived on the scene.
We determined she did not have a pulse and she was not breathing.
After working for several minutes,
we saw a heartbeat on the monitor, so we knew there was electroactivity.
They got something, a faint pulse, something. I knew that she was alive. There was a chance.
By then, Nora had been without a heartbeat for at least 12 minutes. As she hovered between life and death, the ambulance raced toward VCU Medical Center in Richmond, Virginia.
I was in like a trauma state of shock, I think. And I knew that anything could happen. I had no idea. I remember calling people, texting people, making a plea on Facebook for prayer.
I was expecting to hear, worst case scenario. I just thought that we lost our child.
As they rushed into the ER, they learned Nora was still alive, but barely hanging on. Doctors put her in a medically induced coma to calm the toddler and prevent brain swelling. Doctors said the next 48 hours were critical.
They said, "She's in such critical condition, this could go either way at this point."
To get through those dark 48 hours, the couple leaned on each other and a global groundswell of prayer.
God prepared people to pray with us and come alongside us, and then God gave me a vision. I saw the prayers coming up from the earth, from all over the earth, and going into the throne room of God. And he was breathing life onto the prayers.
Nora survived, but doctors were very concerned that the 12 minutes she went without a heartbeat and oxygen had caused irreparable brain damage. Meanwhile, doctors were able to remove Nora's breathing tube and bring her out of the coma.
She still wasn't breathing the way she needed to. She wasn't sitting up, she couldn't hold her head up right, and she didn't have any balance, and she couldn't grab things. The neurologist came in with his whole team, and he said, "She has brain damage. This is why all these things are happening."
That she's not going to be able to walk, and she's not going to be able to talk.
It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to hear in my entire life.
And I'm trying to be, strong. I'm like, "Jesus, this is in your hands now."
Because of COVID-19 restrictions, Katie and Ron had been taking shifts at Nora's bedside. They had just received the news when it was Ron's turn to stay while Katie went home.
I was so broken and defeated, and I just missed Nora, and I just got in her bed, and I just cried, and I cried. And then all of a sudden, something, rose up in me, and I put on a worship song. I praised Jesus, but I also commanded Nora to come out of her grave.
Doctors decided to monitor Nora overnight for seizures.
The neurologist came back and said there was no seizures. And then the next day, I remember her waking up or just opening her eyes. She said, "Mommy."
Later that morning, when Katie returned to Nora's room,
she was standing up in her hospital crib bed, pulling up and literally trying to climb out of the crib. And she laughed and, she smiled so huge when she saw me. I was very surprised. I literally said, has she been doing this all morning?
With a sly grin, Ron said yes. He had decided it would be better for Katie to see for herself.
She was crawling around and getting tangled in her tubes, and that evening she started running around her room. I was very overjoyed. I was so thankful.
Yeah, we got to hold her. She was making all the nurses happy and smiling, and that was kind of like, that's my girl, you know? It was a blessing come true. It was a blessing come true.
17 days after drowning in a backyard pool, Nora was released from the hospital. In fact, she was doing so well, she didn't even need the physical therapy doctors prescribed. Before long, she started talking and hasn't stopped talking since. Having fully recovered, she doesn't hesitate to tell people what happened that day.
I think in a pool, and Jesus saved me.
People reach out to me after the story, I need you to pray for me. And the thing is you don't need me, you have the authority. We all are, should come alongside you and pray with you, but everyone has the authority. But you don't need to beg God, just use your authority that Christ has given you.
Look at my daughter right now. Like, that's God. That's a miracle.
Jesus is doing miracles every single day. Literally the resurrection power of Jesus Christ. I've seen it.